Welcome to today's Explainer. I need you to set aside all your preconceived notions of military history for a minute and prepare for a debriefing on one of the most intense, highly mobilized, and honestly utterly absurd conflicts of the 20th century. I mean, it's a story that plays out exactly like a surreal comedy sketch, but I promise you it is completely 100% real. So picture this. It's 1932 and the Australian government formally declares war. And they didn't just send out a strongly worded letter or something. No, they fully deployed the Royal Australian Artillery. We are talking about mobilized troops armed to the teeth with heavy Lewis machine guns, preparing to face down a massive, relentless invasion force that was rapidly destroying the heartland of Western Australia. 10,000. That represents the sheer volume of military-grade ammunition brought directly to the front lines to combat this overwhelming threat. They were packing enough firepower to take down a small army, fully expecting a decisive and swift victory. But here is the massive plot twist. 20,000. That was the size of the invading horde. But this enemy, it wasn't a foreign military power, it wasn't a rogue militia. This massive force was an incoming horde of giant, 6-foot-tall, flightless birds. Emus. Section 1. The setup. Veterans versus the horde. Okay, let's dive into this and see exactly how a modern military found itself squaring off against local wildlife, and how this built, step by step, into a full-blown ecological crisis. So following World War I, the Australian government gave returning combat veterans land in Western Australia to farm wheat. Standard post-war stuff, right? Well, then the Great Depression hits in 1929. To combat the economic crash, the government urges these exact same farmers to massively increase their wheat production. So they clear more land, they set up new water supplies, and then we get the catalyst. Approximately 20,000 migrating emus arrive. They discover this freshly cleared land, the abundant new water, and literally miles of delicious wheat. For an emu, it's the absolute perfect habitat, and they just begin devouring everything in sight. Now, you have to remember who these farmers actually were. They were combat-hardened ex-soldiers straight from the trenches of World War I. So when faced with an invasion that was completely destroying their livelihood, they didn't just ask for a fence. They demanded a military response. Specifically, they knew they needed machine guns. They petitioned the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pierce, and Pierce actually agreed to send military aid. He calculated that deploying troops to help struggling farmers would make for fantastic positive government propaganda. Section 2. Order of Battle. The Tale of the Tape. So let's look at the matchup, because there is a stark, honestly comical contrast between these two combatants. Representing the Royal Australian Artillery, we have Major G.P.W. Meredith, commanding 2 soldiers equipped with 2 Lewis machine guns and those 10,000 rounds of ammo. Their mobility, well, they were confined to the pretty sluggish speed of a 1930s truck driving over rough dirt terrain. Now for the Emus. The commander is unknown, but presumably a very tall bird. A troop count of 20,000. Their arsenal consists of beaks, claws, and sheer chaotic energy. But crucially, their top speed was an astonishing 30 miles per hour off-road. And if you thought the birds were just some mindless mob, think again. According to the actual post-action reports from Major Meredith himself, the emus seemingly utilized brilliant tactical leaders. Seriously, he claimed that a large black bird would stand watch, acting as a sentry, and would alert the entire flock to the human's presence while the rest of the birds safely ate the crops. Section 3. The Campaign, November 1932. The primary military operations here escalated and collapsed in incredibly rapid succession over the course of just a single disastrous week. We go from the first engagement on November 2nd to a major ambush on the 4th, leading directly to a desperate truck chase and ultimate defeat on November 8th. Let's break these down. The opening salvo took place on November 2nd at Campion. The military spots a vanguard of about 50 emus. The soldiers open fire with their heavy machine guns. But instead of falling, the birds execute a flawless tactical maneuver. They immediately scatter into small, highly evasive groups. They became virtually impossible to target. Despite the massive firepower, the soldiers barely hit a dozen birds before the entire flock just vanished into the brush. It was a complete tactical disaster for the humans. 2 days later, Major Meredith recalibrates. He sets up a massive tactical trap near a local dam, and this time over 1,000 emus wander right into the kill zone. The soldiers are waiting at point-blank range. The tension is palpable. The birds are perfectly lined up. So, did this grand ambush succeed? No. Nope. In what can only be described as a comedic record-scratch moment for military technology, the Lewis gun catastrophically jammed. The soldiers managed to fell only about 12 birds before the weapon locked up entirely. The remaining 980-plus emus simply turned around and walked away totally unscathed. By November 8th, real desperation sets in. Major Meredith attempts a high-speed motorized assault. He literally mounts a machine gun to the back of a truck and orders his men to chase the birds across the rough terrain. And this immediately cascades into total failure. Remember, the emus are capable of 30 miles per hour off-road. They easily outrun the sputtering 1930s vehicle. Furthermore, the ride was so violently bumpy that the gunner couldn't even pull the trigger to fire a single shot. And to cap the whole thing off, the truck eventually crashed. Later that very same day, the military had to tally up the score. And the contrast is just staggering. The Australian military had expended 2,500 rounds of heavy machine gun ammunition. In return, enemy casualties stood at most, a couple hundred birds. It was an absolutely abysmal casualty rate against a foe that appeared to be practically bulletproof. Section 4. The Defeat and Legacy. Facing severe mockery in the national press and straight-up laughter in the Australian parliament, the military formally withdrew its forces. They turned their hoped-for propaganda victory into a spectacular public relations nightmare. So how did they actually fix the problem? Well, it wasn't with artillery. 57,000. In 1934, the government finally instituted a simple bounty system, empowering the farmers themselves to handle the issue. And it worked remarkably well. In just a 6-month period, farmers claimed over 57,000 emu bounties, vastly outperforming the entire mobilized military campaign. But the legend of that initial defeat was forever sealed in history. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer awe the soldiers felt, captured perfectly in this legendary quote from the defeated Major G.P.W. Meredith himself. Speaking with genuine, profound respect for his feathered foes, he stated, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks." It's an incredible epitaph for a truly bizarre event, which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. When the strict rigidity of modern human technology meets the sheer, unpredictable chaos of nature, who really has the upper hand? The Great Emu War of 1932 stands as a hilarious yet pretty humbling reminder of the hubris of humanity. It proves once and for all that you can't always solve an ecological problem by just throwing machine guns at it. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history you think you know.